I'm making my guest's favorite drink.
You picked a mojito, Vesper Martini.
The House of Balloons cocktail.
Nice and crisp.
Join me and some of the world's greatest writers.
Multi-award-winning author of 5 novels.
Best-selling author of more than 20 books.
The Pulitzer Prize, among many other awards.
Welcome to Dedicated. I'm your host, Doug Brunt. Today we're with Catherine Grace Katz. She is the author of the terrific book, The Daughters of Yalta, which takes us to the famous 1945 conference in Yalta, among the big three. I have a funny story about how I came to know of Catherine and the book, which I will tell in a minute. The only better story is how Catherine came to have first look access to archives of the Churchill family and all the treasures that she found in there that led to this terrific book. Catherine, the book is awesome. I loved it. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Now, we're going to have the Gunner today, which is an NA drink, which is probably good because we're kind of getting into the holiday season. There are way too many opportunities for drinks already, so having a non-alcoholic today is probably a good thing.
I think initially I'd asked if I could have a chocolate milkshake, but I realized the blender probably wouldn't work so well with the acoustics here, so this is a good backup choice.
We had a call for a whiskey sour the other day, which I understand can be made with an egg, like a raw egg in there, which we didn't do. So that would be even grosser than I'm actually a fan of a chocolate milkshake, so.
Chocolate milkshakes are fantastic. Definitely not, if you're looking to save some calories leading into the holidays, maybe the perfect choice, but I don't know, it's always a good day for a milkshake in my opinion.
So the Gunner has ginger beer, lime, ginger ale, and bitters, as I understand it.
Yes, and as I understand it, became very popular kind of in the kind of British Empire times out in places like Hong Kong and Singapore, where people would want something refreshing and cool in the middle of the day. I don't know how common it is anywhere today.
It seems like the kind of thing you might have like for around tennis and golf if you don't want to actually get boozed up.
Very popular drink coming off the golf course in the hot climates.
Nice. So as I pour this out, I'll tell you the story. I was at a event for the New England Air Museum that a friend, the Foley family, was putting on. And I was there, and this guy came over and gave me the pitch on The Daughters of Yalta. He's like, "This is an amazing book." Gave me the whole pitch. I'm like, "It sounds amazing." So I got the book right away and read it and loved it and immediately reached out. And fortunately, we were able to make this happen.
Well, I'm so excited that this worked out. Thank you for having me, and thank you to whoever that was who recommended the book.
I wish I could remember his name. He was an undergrad classmate of yours.
Well, if the classmate is listening and you want to let me know who it was, thank you.
Cheers to that person, whoever he is.
Cheers.
Great to see you.
Great to see you, too. Fantastic.
That is refreshing. Mm-hmm. All right, so speaking of your undergrad classmate, that was at Harvard, where you had a BA in history.
Yes. That's right.
And then you went off to Christ Church, Cambridge for more history.
Christ College, Cambridge,
Oh,
actually.
Christ College.
Christ Church is Oxford, Christ College, Cambridge.
Okay, good.
Yes.
Yeah, actually, in my notes, I had it right. I just misspoke.
The light blues and the dark blues start feuding over, Christ.
Is there like a Hogwarts type of rivalry around there or what?
I mean, somewhat. In rowing, rugby, certainly.
Yeah.
More general daily life, not as much.
Okay. How close are they?
They are closer in proximity geographically than you would think, given how long it takes to get from one to the other. There's not
train
really
ride.
a straight train. You have to go down to London and then back up.
And then back out,
So,
yeah. All right. I've done I did visit Oxford, and I remember taking the train up from London. Well, actually, it wasn't too far.
Yeah, it's not bad at all. Both of them incredible places, beautiful. One of the happiest years I ever had, just being able to immerse myself in history, which is you're living with all the time, and in this very pastoral setting where you can literally go out and have tea in an orchard. In the
It seems like
field,
bucolic, and
walk
then
through
learn
cow
and broaden your
pastures.
mind.
Exactly.
And there you were studying modern counterintelligence.
Yes, so I was looking at early counterintelligence practices as they emerged during World War I, initially with the postal censorship program, which the British government instituted to try first to find any enemy German spies that might be in their midst by reading their mail. And then they later learned this was a great way to also enforce the blockade by trying to see who was evading it through reading the mail, which... very interestingly, I discovered as I was doing the research for this, Winston Churchill was instrumental in some of these early counterintelligence practices. He kind of tends to pop up throughout history, even when you're not looking for him.
Yeah.
And also became a real sticking point between Britain and the United States before the United States entered the war, because the right to privacy had emerged as a legal concept in a way here that it had not in the UK.
I looked a little bit at this. I was surprised to see how involved Churchill was in early, years even leading up to World War I. how much intelligence work he was doing. I think a little of this is captured in that show Peaky Blinders, where Churchill's sort of this sort of behind the cloak and dagger type character. And there was this other thing called a D notice. Speaking of the differences between the UK and the US, in the UK, the media, all the newspaper editors were kind of on board with the government, and if the government said, "Hey, don't do that," they wouldn't do it.
Yep.
They were much more. I guess they were much more involved in potential wars and threats than we were here. So there was a lot more of sort of a unity and coalescing around the war effort if that was going to.
That constitutional protection's different in the two countries. And also, I do think that the Brits really do love their I don't know, just the kind of ethos of espionage and a little bit more of the cloak and dagger, perfidious Albion culture. Not saying that explains it, but I'm not surprised.
So, by the way, and a lot of this, I cannot say enough about how fun and informative this book was. Because, you write sort of a ripping narrative, but you're in Yalta, and we'll get to all that in a second, because you finish your studies in the UK around counterespionage, and then you take a job in finance in New York.
Yes. Like so many of my classmates, that siren call of kind of doing the first year analyst program, my dad had worked in finance, so it was kind of the one career that I'd really seen and figured it was easier to give it a try right out the gate after school than to pivot to it later. Figured it wouldn't hurt me in the long run if I did it for a little while, learn some useful skills.
So which bank did you go to?
So I was at BlackRock.
Okay.
And just, a few blocks away from here. So this is very familiar territory. But so I was there in the analyst program working on in alternative investments.
Okay. And this then leads to the Churchill archives, because you have this, advanced degree in history. You've studied all of these things that involve Winston Churchill in his early days. And you go down to the lobby bookstore of your office building in New York.
That's right. Yep. Chartwell Booksellers. It's the only bookstore in the world specializing in books by and about Winston Churchill. I think New York's probably the only place where you could find that. But on days when I just couldn't take the Excel modeling anymore and I just missed engaging with history, I would go down to the lobby and pretend I was going to get a coffee, but I'd really be sneaking into the bookstore.
That's
and over
funny.
many repeat visits, I befriended the owner, Barry Singer, who's fantastic. The bookstore's still there, so if you haven't been, you must check it out. And he has rare first editions of Churchill's books, other books kind of around the topics that relate to Churchill, like any normal bookstore, but it's just a really special place. And so after many repeat visits there, I found out through the bookstore owner that this group called the International Churchill Society would be hosting a dinner across the street from my office at the Waldorf featuring Madeleine Albright as the keynote speaker. And I'd always wanted to hear Secretary Albright speak.
And what year is this?
This would be 2014, 15,
Okay.
16, 15, 15-ish. And so I just said, is there any chance I could volunteer for the dinner? I can't afford a table, but, could I check coats or show people to their tables or something? And the director of the Churchill Society very graciously said, we're very excited to have a young person who's interested in history. Why don't you just come join us? We'd love to have you. And that was kind of the beginning of this whole adventure.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So then they basically, so the archives that became available, newly available, were Sarah Churchill's archives. She's the daughter of Winston Churchill. She accompanied him to the Yalta conference. And so she passes away. She's got as many of these people do, a box full of letters in the back of her closet. And suddenly everyone's like, hey, now we can take a look at these. And that's what you were given special access to?
Yes. So the papers in a box in the closet, actually, one of the other daughters was a box of papers
was
in the
it Harriman
closet.
or
Kathy Harriman's papers, yes. But Sarah Churchill's papers had been part of the Churchill estate. She'd passed away in the 1980s. And so her papers had been archived at Churchill College at Cambridge, where I had done some of my graduate research. And so the International Churchill Society asked if I'd be interested in writing an article for their magazine called Finest Hour about Sarah Churchill's papers and the new release of them. And I said yes, just thinking it'd be a fun way to stay engaged with history, do some writing. Meanwhile, I was thinking about applying to law school. And so the first chance I had when I was able to go back to Cambridge, I went up to the archives, took a look at the papers, wrote this little article that I thought that no one would ever read. And I distinctly remember shortly after the initial dinner where I had met the Churchill family and the International Churchill Society, I was talking to my mom as I was walking down Park Avenue on my way home from the office, and I was telling her about what had happened, and she said, this could take your life in a totally different direction that you never expected. And I said, I don't know, Mom. I think I'm probably just writing an article that very few people are going to read. And she says, I don't know. We'll see. And I think the moral of the story is moms always know, so you should listen to your mom.
Right. So can you describe the Churchill archives where you went? Is it what kind of building and room and all that?
So Churchill College is actually very different from a lot of the colleges at Cambridge. It's a very modern structure, more of the brutalist kind of 1960s, 70s sort of era. But the archival team there is fantastic. So while the building is not one of the beautiful kind of, you're up in the tower of some Gothic building that you might imagine, I think the archives of the royal family are like that. And I've heard other historians talk about their experience of going up this turret. I think it's at Windsor. So it doesn't look like that, but it is an absolute treasure trove, and their team is fantastic. The archivist there, Alan Packwood, is phenomenal. He knows absolutely everything. And, he has just has everything that you could possibly imagine about Churchill right there at his fingertips. And so I got to see the letters exchanged between the king and Churchill as they were talking about whether they should go observe D-Day or not. Margaret Thatcher's papers, a number of them are there. Her handbag is there. So it's just really a special place. And then when you need a break, you can cycle down the road to Fitzbilly's and have yourself a Chelsea bun, and it's delightful.
How about the Harriman stuff? Like, so Kathy is the daughter of our ambassador to Russia and then later the UK, I guess.
Yes, and I think Averil Harriman is probably one of the people who was most impactful on the 20th century that many people today have not heard of or have forgotten about.
But he was one of the richest men in the world at the time.
He was, I think, the fourth richest man in the world. He had been the chairman of Union Pacific Railroad. He had manganese mine investments in the Soviet Union, founder of Brown Brothers Harriman, a part owner of Newsweek magazine. So, you name it, he was part of it. Just really kind of a dashing figure, kind of like a John Hamm sort of Mad Men character. But he had two daughters, and his daughter Kathleen was with him as partly as a journalist and then kind of as his assistant.
And she was very glamorous, like a great snow skier, beautiful woman, socialite, and very, kind of whip smart on top of it all. She was an alternate for what became the canceled 1940s Winter Olympics for the U.S. ski team. She'd go hiking up the mountain on sealskins for one trip down on fresh powder. The Harrimans, of course, started Sun Valley as kind of a way to draw people out west to use Union Pacific Railroad by giving them a glamorous destination to come and ski after Americans fell in love with the 1928 Winter Olympics and skiing. And so she's just this really dynamic gal who is fearless and bold and adventurous, and she just plunges headlong into the idea of being a war reporter in London with her father during World War II, where they become very close friends with the Churchill family. And I was so fortunate to be able to connect with her sons through the Churchills and the Roosevelts. So the three families kind of one led to the other. And they literally just, after she passed away in 2014, had a box of papers in her closet that they discovered that were her letters home from London and the Soviet Union while she was there with her father. So it's sort of your sleuthing that led to finding that box of letters, and then
they had the letters. They knew they had the letters, but it was through the graciousness of all three families, kind of making introductions amongst each other and other folks that they knew, that I was able to learn that these papers existed and realize, oh my goodness, not only was Sarah Churchill with her father at Tehran and then Yalta, but also these other two daughters were at Yalta as well. It's this really unique role of daughter diplomats.
It's amazing. Yeah, so our three daughters, so the audience is keeping track. We've got Kathy Harriman with her father, Sarah Churchill with her father, and Anne Roosevelt with her father. And all three of these men, decided not to bring the wife or some other person, but had their daughter accompany them. And it's a thematic thing that you draw together beautifully in the book, but there's this incredible father-daughter theme that works, and they play critical roles in making the conference. The conference was supposed to sort of plan the peace and help us to avoid all the things that we ended up not avoiding at all anyway.
Yes.
And Stalin has a lot to do with that, but it's an incredible period of time. So let's get into the conference and the big three, Stalin, Churchill, Roosevelt. It takes place in Yalta, which is on the north coast of the Black Sea. Famously a summer vacation spot of the Tsars, way back in the day. And you paint the picture so well of this war-ravaged area, these old palaces that the Nazis had basically just, stripped down to nothing. And so they come into this war-ravaged, palatial, though, area as the setting for the whole book.
Yes, and there's this, apocryphal quip about, of Winston Churchill saying if we'd spent 10 years, we couldn't have found a worse place to have this conference than Yalta. But hard to imagine now, but it really was the best of bad alternatives available. Stalin,
especially since Stalin wouldn't go anywhere else, basically.
He refuses to leave the Soviet Union. He says that his doctors advise him that it's bad for his health to fly. Really, he's afraid of both flying and leaving his security apparatus in the Soviet Union. And he also recognizes at this point in the war, he holds more cards than do his allied partners. So if they want to meet in person, they're going to have to come to him. But this this area is just absolutely not any place that a principal would be allowed to travel today for one of these, essential summits to the future of global peace. You have bed bugs that have infested these palaces. Yes, they were once imperial palaces. Another one of them, the one that Stalin chooses to stay in, was the home of the man who was the mastermind behind the murder of Rasputin. Some atmospherics going on,
Yusupov,
I think very deliberate on Stalin's part. And literally, the palaces have been stripped by the Nazis down to the doorknobs, which the Nazis stripped out to use as scrap metal.
Yeah.
It's not a pleasant place to be. There are a lack of bathrooms. There are latrines constructed in the garden.
I loved some of that. There were some very funny stories. So before we get into some of the broader themes, just some really fun little treasures you have in the book that are so fun to read about. So the water, the sort of running tap water, was really risky to drink. You could get some sort of bacteria from that. But the mineral water was also so you could drink mineral water from a bottle, but that was a laxative, and there were no toilets. So it was like, pick your poison. You're going to get diarrhea either way.
Exactly.
And there's nowhere to go.
No.
And there's a very funny scene in there where Stalin, comes running out of a big meeting, and he's got to pee so badly. He outruns his security detail and sort of dashes into the nearest bathroom, but a security detail can't find him. So the whole place goes bananas trying to find Stalin, who's off like peeing in some little bathroom.
Yes, and they think the Americans have launched some sort of kidnapping stunt. They can't find Stalin. There's a whole nefarious plots going on. But really, he just had to use the restroom, which does become a theme throughout the conference, where you have kind of some lower-level diplomacy being conducted as these generals and admirals are queuing up for their turn in the bath in the morning. They'll send their aides to wait for them. You had the head of the RAF jumping up and down to see above the transom to see who's in there taking too long. So certainly the great equalizer in Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
It is amazing. So a lot of these little stories just come out of these letters, as, Kathy is writing home, she'll tell that anecdote. And another one that I thought was so funny was someone just in an offhand way said, this caviar would be really nice with some fresh lemon squeezed on top. And the next day, the Soviets, who were apparently trying to be great hosts, gracious hosts, brought in a lemon tree out of nowhere so that they, just as a weird little, it's almost a little spooky because everything, of course, was recorded. There were listening devices all over the place. So some quiet aside comment was picked up and provided for.
Mm-hmm, definitely. Yeah, there are bugs everywhere, both of the natural and the electronic variety.
All right. Yeah. Another one, if you were cold in bed at night, the Soviets had a different way in mind of addressing that and warming you up.
Yes, we have bed warmers that we think of, the little metal box with coal in it or a warm brick or something. But then, there could also be young women available to perhaps warm your bed if you wanted, which I don't think anybody actually accepted.
I can't remember who was it offered to. So if you were cold at night and you wanted to warm up, they would bring you a young Soviet girl.
Well, I don't think they ever actually.
No one actually did it, right?
No,
but when was someone offered?
This comes through Anna Roosevelt. Somebody had told Anna Roosevelt that this was an option. So I don't think anybody ever actually did that. But or if it was meant entirely to be in jest, but it was certainly there are different concepts around hospitality there versus in Britain or the United States.
Did you have much intel? So we knew that where Churchill was staying and where Roosevelt were staying, both amazing palaces that had belonged to the czars or someone basically royal. But they'd been completely demolished due to Nazi occupation. So they were barely functioning residences. Where Stalin was that in better shape? That was the Yusupov Palace. Did we have any intel on what it looked like inside there?
That one is a little bit murkier. That's actually now a personal residence of Vladimir Putin in that area. So obviously I could not go there to see it myself. I don't know if that one was as bad. I don't think any of them were in good shape.
Yeah, I would speculate you probably had a few more toilets over there.
Better, but Roosevelt actually was given kind of what was seen as the premier residence, partially because of mobility issues, so he could get around without being troublesome for him, and wouldn't have to travel to the plenary sessions. It was all hosted right there where he was staying, and it's this kind of gesture to the American president, who is outranking Churchill kind of in the pecking order of who's really going to be kind of running the future of the world after World War II, which is a tough pill for Churchill to swallow. So Roosevelt is kind of given the A+ treatment to the extent that any is actually available.
Yeah. And he also was far sicker than most people knew, except for Anne and his daughter and a few others. And one of the reasons why Anne was there, because he needed a real sort of trusted confidant to keep the secret of how sick he actually was.
Yeah, Anna is really the only person who knows how sick he is. Even FDR himself doesn't know how ill he is. He is dying of congestive heart failure, which has been diagnosed about a year before that, when Anna decided to move back into the White House while her husband was in the Mediterranean with the army. And she hadn't seen her father for a while, and she noticed that he looked unwell, to the extent that it wouldn't necessarily be alarming if you saw him day in and day out. But for someone who hadn't seen him for a while, there were small changes that had accumulated over time that she became very alarmed and insisted he have a comprehensive medical examination. The doctor never told FDR what was wrong with him. Even Eleanor really couldn't bring herself to see that he couldn't just power through with sheer willpower. And so the secret falls to Anna to keep, to try to manage her father and his schedule and his responsibilities so that he can get rest. He eats properly. You're just really anything that she can do to ease the burden, whether or not she should have been taking papers out of his inbox and distributing them to others, kind of becoming a gatekeeper, fending off certain people who want to meet with him, fobbing them off on someone else. Well-intentioned, but maybe not the best thing for the outcome, specifically for Yalta.
So the book is full of amazing, fun detours with these stories and insider details from the letters. You also do spend time acknowledging the horrors of war and the effects that can have on people, with a lot of the mental illness and suicides that we see, particularly toward the end of the book, and sort of the after effects that can have on people.
Absolutely. And there are a number of amusing little anecdotes that come through where I think these people had to just kind of get through with as positive an attitude as they could have and see the humor in the unpleasant situation in which they found themselves, but they're dealing with incredibly important issues that will affect the lives of millions of people come the end of the war, the rise of the Soviet Union, what to do about the future of Poland, which is one of the most important issues of the conference and really kind of the through line of the narrative of Yalta and what comes after. And at its core, I kind of see the story, while it does have humorous moments, it really is a slow-burning tragedy where we know what's going to happen. We know the Iron Curtain is going to fall on a large portion of Eastern Europe. There's very little that Churchill and Roosevelt can do at this point, short of declaring war against the Soviet Union after the Nazis have been defeated. And so you can see what's coming in this windup. But yet I do think you get such a human look at these figures who, when you put them on a pedestal, it's very hard to connect with them on a human level. But then to see them, as somebody's parent, or to see their child with them, it just we don't know what it's like to negotiate with Stalin across the dinner table, but we all know what it's like to be someone's child. And I think that, plus these kind of humorous aspects that do speak to a fundamental aspect of being a human, it kind of helps bring these figures to a level where the geopolitics become more readily understood through seeing them as human beings.
Yeah, that's why the book is such a great way in, not only to that event at Yalta, but to those key, huge titans of the century, to see it through the letters of the daughters. So, being an historian prior to writing the book, you of course knew a lot about Churchill, Roosevelt, and Stalin. Did writing the book and researching the book change anything in your view of those three people? Was there a big sort of flip or new perspective of them?
I think for me, the biggest, I'd say, kind of nuance around the way that I saw someone really came through FDR for me. I had probably spent less time with FDR than Churchill in the course of my academic work. And while FDR, of course, was a remarkable president, he probably had a better pulse on domestic policy and domestic politics than any other president. But I do think it's a little bit more nuanced when it comes to foreign policy, especially his view of the Soviet Union, and kind of just feeling like, this touchy-feely style of politics where if, they like me and I like them, we can make a deal.
He was very hopeful, almost naively hopeful that it was all going to be fine.
He didn't have a huge grasp of the history of the Soviet Union and the Russian Empire, was reluctant to use his advisors around him who really were experts to be able to bring that color to what it really is like to negotiate with a Soviet or Russian leader. And so I think he was somewhat naively led astray by his own belief in his powers of personal persuasion, which is a trap that I think you've seen many American presidents fall into, from FDR to Clinton to Bush to Obama to Biden to Trump. I think every single one of them kind of underestimates the way that interacting with the Russian leader is fundamentally different culturally, negotiation style, tactics, kind of the understanding of the history of the relationship, it's just different. And I think that is something that we continue to be surprised about today. But if you look at history, we should not be surprised.
Yeah, yeah. One other, switching gears a little bit on the book, but staying with the book for one more thing here. Everyone was having affairs with everyone. It's just crazy.
Except for Winston.
He was a cigar and a bottle of champagne, and he's good.
Yeah, they were very happy. But yes, everyone else seemed to be having an affair.
Yeah. So Harriman. Well, let's see. I wrote down some notes on this. She was with Franklin Roosevelt Jr., right?
Well, there was a brief thing. Yeah, it's not to the extent that some of these other affairs were going on, but there was a flirtation, we'll say.
And then Averell Harriman, the elder ambassador, was with Pamela Churchill, who was married to Winston's son, Randolph. And let's see.
And then she's also having an affair with Peter Portal, who's the head of the RAF. And then Sarah Churchill and the American ambassador to Britain, who's not at the conference, Gil Wynant. They're having an affair.
I mean, you're left to think there's only like 15 people you can choose from to like have an affair with. Exactly. It's like everyone's sort of intertwined.
It's a circle where there's this group of a circle of trust at the top where they spend a lot of time together. They know that they can trust these people, and kind of when you're in close quarters in that kind of chaotic environment, a lot of people not knowing if there's going to be a tomorrow. I can see how
I guess
they might act upon that.
Did Churchill have any affairs that we know of? At least in those later years.
Not that I know of. I don't think that Andrew Roberts has said. I mean, he definitely had great admiration for women that he was around, and spoke of them very warmly. Mm-hmm. But I don't know of it.
The Empire was his mistress, I guess.
And it was a tragedy to him that he was the prime minister who really saw kind of the unwinding of the British Empire. That was the one thing that he really wanted to avoid. Mm-hmm. It was a tragedy to him, and that is really kind of a key sticking point between Roosevelt and Churchill, though I guess Churchill himself saying, he never courted anyone as intently as he did with FDR. So if there's a lover courting someone, it'd be Churchill courting FDR to bring him into the war initially in the early part of World War II.
Yeah, let's talk a bit about your process. So you get access to these archives. And then you're troving through it. By the way, your notes here are extensive. So you were in many archives. I know you did some secondary research. You mentioned you read Atkinson's Liberation trilogy about some of the World War II stuff as well.
I think kind of just part of being in the field, academically, just being interested personally. I wouldn't even call it kind of like research specifically for this book, but just these are the things that I read just because I enjoy them. I want to stay on top of the field. I've read them for assignments in school. So just kind of like an accumulation of knowledge through reading great historians like many of the guests that you've had on the show, and a number of whom I've had the good fortune of meeting at conferences, or kind of doing speaking engagements, and all of them have been lovely and supportive and wonderful. So, yes, it's been great fun for me to kind of be on the other side of this.
Yeah. When did it flip from the article to the Daughters of Yalta, this much broader swing at a book?
Yeah, so it was something that I kind of had been percolating in the back of my mind, and I actually had thought I was going to leave finance and go to work at the State Department. But even though I had an offer, that was when the Office of Personnel Management hack happened, and they couldn't clear me in time before the administration ended. And so with that, the job went away. Oh. And then I was like, well, I'm applying to law school. I don't think I want to stay in finance anymore. But, I kind of had this idea that is percolating, and it was literally, my family went to see Hamilton on election night, and kind of realizing that there wouldn't be continuity kind of through the next administration to roll into a job that I hoped to have. I was like, you know what, maybe I should write a book. I think I'm going to apply to law school. I can kind of have that hopefully in the back pocket, but this is an idea that's just kind of niggling at the back of my head. And, I think
Did you defer law school acceptance and wrote the book?
I deferred for 2 years, but I finished writing the book during my first year of law school.
Oh my gosh.
And then it came out during what would have been my second year. I took that year off to do book tour, and then I went back and finished after that.
Wow.
Yes.
My God, that was a busy few years.
It was. It was also a lot of fun, and I had fun along the way, too. I wasn't just, a slave in library all the time. Harvard Law is an interesting place. It's amazing how hard it is to get people out of a library on a Friday night. I'm like, you can't be busier than me. Come on, let's go. But yeah, it was, and it was great to also be back in an academic environment with a great, world-class, unparalleled library like the Harvard Library System, to be able to kind of finish off my research, to just be in that academic setting that I loved and had been such a happy place for me as an undergrad. And so it was kind of a full circle moment to come back and kind of finish this book and be a professional historian in the place that I'd started my history journey in earnest as an undergrad.
So you organized a lot of the archival research. You leaned a little bit on some secondary research and also did a lot of interviews. Because I noticed like toward the end of the book, you really tie things together with some folks you've talked to more recently who could give an additional perspective on it.
Definitely. And the overwhelming majority is archival primary sources and interviews. The secondary sources, I think it kind of, like many historians, just over a lifetime of reading, it just kind of becomes second nature in a way. And so it's kind of the secondary literature becomes just kind of part of your consciousness kind of in a subliminal way in a way. But the archival research is by far the bulk of this. And it's going to archives, opening boxes. It's, usually you get to that last box marked miscellaneous at the end of the day, and the archivist is like, all right, let's go wrap it up. Time to clean up your workstation. And that's really
this is all post-COVID, I guess, so you could get back in these places.
No, this was before COVID.
Oh, pre-COVID. Okay.
This is pre-COVID.
What year did this come out?
2020. Okay. So this came out in the depths of COVID.
Okay,
Very rough time for
That's right. When you're promoting.
But I did have the chance to do a number of interviews with the family members of these three daughters. I got to interview Churchill's last surviving secretary, Lady Jane Williams, which was an unbelievable experience.
How old was she?
She passed away 2 years ago. She was in her 80s and 90s. And I got to interview her for the first time. We went to a Polish restaurant around this corner from her house in London, which had been the restaurant frequented by the Polish government in exile in London during the war. And it looks very much like it did at the time. There are pictures of the Polish leaders on the walls. And so just getting to hear from her.
Which, by the way, is the key sticking point of the Yalta meeting. Like, that's the number one issue is what are we going to do with Poland?
Yes, and Britain went to war to guarantee Polish sovereignty at the outset. Churchill doesn't want to return to London and look his colleagues who've been in exile, in the eye and say, we can't secure the very thing we went to defend in the first place. And yet Stalin has boots on the ground across Eastern Europe, including in Poland, and there's no way to get them out.
And Stalin's like, I really like this communist government we have there now, not the one that's in exile.
Well, what he wants is friendly neighbors on his borders. And friendly neighbors means having a government that's going to be amenable to the interests of the Kremlin. And so that really is the crux of Yalta. But to be able to kind of be talking about these issues with someone who knew Churchill personally and just had such warm admiration, love for him and the family, it just was so special.
I was just going to say, like, how did she genuinely really just love and adore him?
Yes. And I have heard from so many people, in reading their letters, even folks like Doc Colville, who maybe wasn't the biggest Churchill fan initially when you took the job at Downing Street with him right at the beginning of Churchill's premiership, that you couldn't help but come to love Churchill and working with him. And so Lady Jane Williams, she was also the niece of Peter Portal, who was the head of the RAF, and Rab Butler, who was another prominent British politician. And so she really kind of had a lot of the insights personally. But, her stories of seeing Sarah come home and kind of fly up the stairs and give her papa a big hug and a kiss, it's just, it's makes it so much more personal. She was with Churchill the night that King George VI passed away and Elizabeth came back as queen and was standing with Anthony Eden's private secretary kind of behind the wheel of another plane at the airfield watching as Elizabeth came down the stairs of the plane as queen for the first time and talking about Churchill in the car with tears running down his eyes of the loss of his friend and trying to write a speech for the BBC that night. And just, those are things that there are very few people left who have those memories and who can kind of personally give us those accounts. And to be able
Did you record these interviews?
Some of them I recorded, some of them I took notes. It kind of depends on the interview and the setting about whether people are more comfortable to be forthcoming, kind of writing notes by hand versus making a recording. I got to interview FDR's granddaughter, Ellie Seagraves, who is remarkable. She's in her 90s, lives outside of Washington, D.C. She was 18 when Yalta happened, had incredibly clear memories of this time, of her grandparents. The Churchill family, all so wonderful. The Harrimans, absolutely wonderful. All of them so forthcoming. And just to hear people tell stories about their grandparents or about their aunt, it's just a different experience than reading about it, even their own words in an archive, or certainly from a secondary source where you're just that much more removed, as great as the research is in so many of them. But I felt very privileged to be able to do that these people trusted me with the stories of their families, especially your mother. Like, that's just such a personal thing. And to have the chance to write this book kind of right at this moment in time where we're losing the last few people who were around there.
It's great that you captured that and got it into the book. Did you show early drafts to anyone either related to some of the subjects of the book, or who were some of your early readers?
So I did show some parts of the final draft to the families for fact-checking purposes. None of them asked for any kind of editorial control over it, for the ability to use the papers, which I greatly appreciate. And these people, they just were absolutely wonderful every step of the way and will be lifelong friends. But my early readers are my family, especially my mom, and most especially my younger sister, who is the world's most ruthless editor. She was 17 when I did this book.
Wow.
She was in high school. I'd be reading aloud to myself. It was COVID, so I'd be kind of, or the summer before I went to law school, I was home a good bit, and then COVID, and kind of polishing, reading aloud to myself. I read aloud to myself before I turn anything in, because I think that's the only way you can really hear the rhythm of what you've written. And I would just hear from the other room, stop, go back about 3 paragraphs ago, you used the same word, please change it. Also, your sentence structure is too similar in proximity. I'm like, oh my God.
That's great.
It's unbelievable. And so she is the most terrifying editor. I'm much more afraid of what my sister's opinion is than my actual editor, because by the time it gets to my actual editor, my sister has been through it.
It's already in great shape.
Yes. Yeah. My mom is great too. She has a little bit nicer of a way of going about it. But my sister just cuts right to the chase. And my brother also, he's part of it. But
what is your sister doing now?
My sister just graduated 2 years ago from the University of Chicago, or a year and a half ago, and she works in D.C.
Okay.
In that world. And
we need to get her over at Simon & Schuster, where I am. We need that.
Truly, she's the best. So I can't loan her out until she's done with this next book for me. So, but I'm very, very grateful to have a family that I can talk about big ideas. That my mom doesn't mind at 2 a.m. after we've stayed up too late watching a show.
So the whole
family's
family's
I have some big idea and I want to talk about it.
That's fun. It's great. I know we were talking before we got started that your family's you're all big fans of Downton Abbey. And it's just fun to have a family that's all a bunch of readers or loves the same kind of shows and history and can have those kind of big discussions.
Great discussions around the dinner table. My siblings are my best friends. We've always gotten along very well, despite being very spread out in age, and it's just great fun. So I'm really fortunate that we can have these discussions together, and I think that you get a level of honesty from your family that you can't get from other people, where they want the best for you, is they only want you to put your best foot forward and are willing to help you get there, and hopefully I can do that for them as well. But it makes it more fun. My sister will joke around that she's like, we all went to law school, and then we all took the bar exam, and we all did Daughters of Yalta. So,
well, it was a team success. The book is a huge success. Got rave reviews from Eric Larson and also Julian Fellows of Downton Abbey, and you did an event, I think, with Julian Fellows about the book. And yet, you're a practicing lawyer to this day. So what's going on? I know you've your third year in a firm, and then also working on a new book.
I am, yes. My final manuscript goes in on Thursday, so 2 days from now, as of time of recording.
Congrats.
Thank you. Yes, so I am a full-time attorney and a full-time author. I think sometimes when people hear that I'm working at a law firm, they default to this, she's a girl in a coffee shop doing her passion project. It's so great that you're still following your passions. And yes, I am passionate about this, but this is also a business. This is my career. So I think it's sometimes I don't necessarily.
And you're on the litigation side with the firm, is that right?
Litigation disputes. I kind of work in some of the tech advisory kind of space, which is very interesting. I think being in the law at this point in time is very helpful to kind of stay in a forward-looking mindset and not just think about the past. Certainly becoming more adept at using tools like AI as a result of kind of forcing myself to use it in the kind of the law firm capacity, and then seeing how certain tools are helpful on the history side in a different way. And so, more than anything, as much as I want to be writing and researching and telling stories all the time, I also like being part of a team. And writing can be very solitary, so it's nice to have a feeling of camaraderie and a place to go and not just be alone in a library all the time, though I also really enjoy that and am extremely happy just sitting for 12 hours in the library, just going through sources. And then
I totally know what you're saying. We're not all one thing. And I was saying to Rick Atkinson last week, that's why I do this show. I enjoy coming out and seeing people and being part of a team, with Justin and Mike here as the producers. And That's a lot of fun, but I also am very happy to go sit with my imaginary friends in my, in my office and write stories. So
definitely.
Kind of hits both things.
Yeah.
So can you say what the next book is about?
Yes. So my next book is about the Hindenburg disaster. It is called The Shadow Before the Flame, the Hindenburg disaster and the Prelude to War. And so it's not only
So you're backing up about 7 years or so?
Yes, to 1937. And kind of this, I think, largely forgotten time in the 1930s where it's between the Depression and kind of the hallmark events of the march to World War II in Europe, where it was a very hopeful time where science and technology had led to remarkable breakthroughs, capabilities. The kind of chrome Art Deco aesthetic feels very shiny and futuristic, and yet you see the winds of war and the shadows and the clouds accumulating. And so it's kind of putting the Hindenburg disaster back into the history in which it belongs through seeing the rise of the Nazis, the road to World War II, and the making of modern breaking news media.
That's great. So do you have a pub date yet or not yet?
To be announced shortly. It'll be next fall.
Okay, great.
Yes.
Well, I'm looking forward to that. You'll have to come back.
Absolutely. I hope you'll have me again.
Of course. Well, on to the lightning round then with Catherine. Your favorite book as a kid?
The Little House books. Absolutely. I loved all of the Little House, the Laura Ingalls ones, and then the prequels and the Rose books.
Did you experience that separately and prior to seeing the show?
I never watched the show. To this day, I've
wow.
never watched the Little House on the Prairie show. I'm a Little House purist. My other favorite books, definitely Anne of Green Gables. Anne of Green Gables is a family favorite, and my mom would read aloud to us all the time when we were little. Before bed, on the porch in the summer, she'd sit and read aloud for a long time. Every, in hot afternoons was, you just needed a break from the sun, and we'd read everything from kind of English children's classics of days gone by to Harry Potter. And my little sister, when she was a baby, she'd be in like the bassinet nearby listening. And
that's great.
It was really special. And I think just from my mom reading aloud to us, that just you kind of get storytelling and narrative in your ear.
Yeah.
And it stays with you, and that kind of the cadence of the words and the imagination, just you don't even realize that you're thinking about it, and yet it's just that passive immersion through reading.
Totally. And whether it's fiction or narrative, history, nonfiction, it's storytelling and how you are conveying information.
Yes.
So not even a little curious, would you stream one episode down of Michael Landon Little House, or are you just going to keep away from that?
To me, it just looks so 1970s. I just can't get past the lack of just not even an attempt to make it look authentic to the time period. And I don't know. I love it in its form.
Yeah, don't mess with it.
I don't want to go somewhere else with it. I'm just very happy where my relationship is with Little House.
Okay, good.
And also Nancy Drew. I love Nancy Drew too.
Oh yeah. Well, I was a Hardy Boys guy, but I also did dabble a little over with Nancy Drew. But my wife is the same with Willy Wonka. She loves the Gene Wilder movie. She refuses to even peek at any of the redos or the other ones.
Same. The original is the best.
Yeah. Book or books you're reading now?
So I really look forward to diving into a pile of books to read after Thursday. So a couple things that are on my Christmas list, Aaron Ross Sorkin's 1929. I've really been wanting to get into some O. Henry short stories, which I have not read many of, but they are delightful. And then I'm eagerly awaiting Benjamin Stevenson's next installment in the Everyone in My Family's Killed Someone series.
I don't know that. I'll have to check that out.
Hilarious. Highly recommend. I love a good spy thriller, murder mystery. Can never go wrong with an Agatha Christie.
Yep.
So I read broadly, and I'd actually say I read a lot more fiction than I read nonfiction, even though I write nonfiction.
What about when you're drafting, when you're writing that first draft, are you reading a lot, or are you just reading so much research material that you're not really with an outside book?
I think it depends. While I was doing Daughters of Yalta, I got to a point where I was kind of a year out to publication where I really just was afraid to read, because I had this feeling of like, oh my God, what if no one ever reads my book? You've kind of had this peek at how the sausage is made, where it just kind of changes your relationship with reading for a little bit. At least it did for me. And I was just so worried, every time I pick up a book, I'm like, what if nobody reads mine? What if I did this? And nothing ever comes of it. And so I also went through a phase where I just read so many books I absolutely loved. Like I read Gentlemen in Moscow, Boys in the Boat, and Robert Harris, Officer and a Spy, kind of in quick succession. Oh, and The Martian. And I absolutely loved every single one of those. And then I just looked around. I'm like, I know there are great books out there, but I love these so much. And am I going to find anything else that I like this much? This is gripping. Oh, and Graham Moore's Last Days of Night. So those 5 I read like in a row. And just, I don't know, I just kind
That's a nice run.
It was great.
Yeah.
And I was just like, well, you know, I can just hang it up on reading right now because this is...
Yeah, there is that
great
empty feeling of
readers.
turning the final page in a book you
Yes.
absolutely love. Like, oh,
Yeah.
man, I want to get right back. I actually, usually when I finish a book, I tend to start a book that same day just to try to like ease that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I was the
that
kid
feeling a little
who
bit.
would go to I had special library privileges when I was in grade school, where I'd get to go to the library every day and check out 2 books, and I'd go home and read them both and then come back
Wow.
and get 2 more. So I was reading all the time, just crazy
So
amount of
you're a pretty
reading.
fast reader?
I guess.
I wish I was.
probably.
I'm kind of a slow reader. I wish
Yeah.
and with this, like I'm reading constantly for the show. I need to somehow train myself to be faster.
I don't know, but I love reading. I think my favorite book of all time is probably The Count of Monte Cristo. It's already over 1,000 pages. If it were 3,000, I'd keep going.
Did you watch the movie of that or stick only with the book?
I've seen the Jim Caviezel one.
Yes, that's the one I saw.
A new one.
There's
that
an old
just
one,
came
right,
out,
too?
Oh, I have seen the very old one, but
Yeah.
I think there's a new one that just came out or is about to come out that I am looking forward to.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. The Caviezel one I've seen, so it was good. All right. A part of the writing/publishing process of a narrative history that you did not anticipate despite your academic background with history.
This may be like a slightly cheaty way to answer this question, but the number of times that I'm asked in book talks how much of the book is from my imagination. And I just kind of stop it. Like, it's nonfiction. Nonfiction means not fiction, means not made up. Like,
Yeah.
if I said the wind was blowing from the east, it wasn't because this is like some atmospheric vibe that I'm trying to give of the Soviets rising. And, you know, there was a meteorological report where it said the wind was blowing from the east that day. There are, you know, over 100 pages of notes in the back. So if I said something, there's a source that it came from. So I get that a lot. But I guess in a way, that's not a terrible question, even though it does kind of hurt a little bit with the amount of research that I've done, because I want you to feel like you're reading a novel. I almost want you to forget that you're reading nonfiction. So maybe I just it's a little too hard.
I know what you mean. I actually occasionally get that too. I'm like, no, all of narrative history
Yes.
is in the nonfiction category. You know, it's all there.
Yep.
As Eric Larson says, anything in quotation marks, you know, is sourced and was actually said by someone. So,
and even if it's not in quotation mark, if it's a fact, it came from somewhere. It's not just a figment of my imagination.
yeah. But that is a credit to you. It's told in a novelistic way that gets people, you know, feeling the atmosphere. Which of the big 3 had the most significant impact on the 20th century?
That's an impossible question. They all had such significant impact. But the way I kind of think about impact on history, and you can kind of talk about whether it's the great man of history theory or if it's history and systemic forces, or, you know, kind of the systemic forces being the things that matter far beyond any human's impact. I think that when you look at history, most individuals have the biggest impact on the downside. I think you have a lot of catastrophic individuals like a Stalin or a Hitler. And I think you don't have that many individuals who changed history to such an extent personally on the upside. And I think
They're
that's
more
where,
riding the wave as opposed to...
Yeah, or kind of because of the you know, a country's economy or their geography or their kind of relationships with allies. There are certain things that are, if not inevitable, far more likely. But I think the reason that someone like a Churchill or a George Washington or a Lincoln kind of does seem to stand head and shoulders above other leaders in history is because I do think these are some of the individuals, had a different leader been in place at the time, history would have turned out differently. And so, I don't know, maybe I'm too much of a Churchill homer, but I think, you know, kind of had he not been prime minister when he was, the future for Britain and the rest of the world may have looked very different. Not to say that FDR wasn't a phenomenal leader. I think FDR's presidency has very much set the direction for the country kind of from his presidency. And so you can see an enormous impact in the United States and the American century through the values of FDR. But I don't feel as much if FDR had not been president or had been president for not as long that we would have been in a fundamentally different place by the end of and just after World War II had Harry Truman had been president earlier, or, you know. So I guess that's kind of my circle around way of saying I think I will go with Churchill in this case. But if you talk about kind of impact on history on the downside, the number of people, millions of people who died in the Soviet Union as a result of Stalin in his leadership, that is also a fundamental impact on history.
Yeah, that's an interesting thought, the catastrophic figure. And because a lot of people say, you know, if we could only get rid of Stalin or Putin, and it's like, I don't know, careful what you wish for. Like the next guy could be far worse. Like maybe he's actually holding back the dam a little bit more than we realize. And Stalin, the other Soviet figure you talk a bit about in the book is Beria, this totally sinister, creepy guy. And, imagine if he were the guy instead of Stalin, it might have been far worse. Stalin it's hard to imagine worse, but that guy is really sinister.
Yes.
Like he might have been worse.
The head of the NKVD, absolutely sinister, sick, deranged person. I mean, tortured people. He
raped people just like casual rape.
Yeah, and
it's
then
like,
brought them flowers afterwards. Just like disgusting. But one of the most interesting things that I read while doing the research for this book was the writings of the Marquis de Custine, who was a French aristocrat who went to Russia in the 1830s and wrote of his experience of being there, kind of like the Alexis de Tocqueville, but of Russia. And what he writes about being in the Soviet Union in the 1830s, it sounds almost like what you could write today. Whereas observations about the Russians being very gracious hosts and showing you around, but in all of the show that they put on, obscuring what they don't want you to see, or that religion is, to some extent free in Russia, but then it's only the result of the kind of the generosity of the Tsar, and what he's given today, he can take away tomorrow. And all of these observations, there's just such a continuity across time, whether it's the Russian Empire, the Soviet Union, the Russian Federation, that I think in order to understand Russia, you have to understand its history. And there's kind of a whole discussion around the applied history field about whether applied history is something we should emphasize more as historians. And I think everyone should involve more kind of historically oriented thinking in their considerations about the world and policy. But often I think applied history kind of devolves into this like one-for-one comparison of event and lesson, with Munich kind of being the number one repeated, lesson from history. Part of the problem, I think, is that lessons from history don't reveal themselves until our own times make us reconsider past events in different ways that we hadn't seen them before, and new lessons emerge that we hadn't anticipated. But I also think what applied history is should really be a depth of understanding of a place and a people and a culture and the way that those people see themselves in their own history. And I think that's fundamental, especially when dealing with a place like Russia.
Yeah. Yeah. Russia's so misunderstood by the West, and in the history of, it's half Asian, half European, but it's been autocratic, and
yet
people, it's just like
unto its own.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Switching gears dramatically.
Yes.
Favorite few recent TV shows to recommend to the audience.
Gosh. Okay. I kind of have them in categories. So you've got your perennial favorites. We've already talked about Downton, Band of Brothers. I mean, for me, this is like an annual rewatch. These are the two greatest things ever made for screen, in my opinion. But there are new shows that have come out that I've loved recently. I'm very excited about the new season of Black Doves.
I don't know that one.
It's Keira Knightley, kind of a...
Oh, I have seen. It's a spy thing. Yeah.
Spy,
I've seen
assassin for hire kind of situation. I love a good espionage thriller, so that's fantastic. I also love Emily in Paris coming back 2 weeks, so very excited about that. But I also now and then love a good, what is it? Project Runway, Dancing with the Stars. It just makes you happy.
Something on the Bravo network. Yeah.
Not reality TV, but like kind of the more creative competition based.
Okay.
I don't know. It's good fun.
How about like the cooking shows, like a Gordon Ramsay,
I don't do Gordon Ramsay. I've done some Great British Baking Show. I mostly stick to the period dramas as my shows of choice. I've been watching The Diplomat. I've enjoyed that.
Oh, Kerry Russell.
That more as it's gotten farther into the show.
Her Matthew Rhys, I guess they met on The Americans.
Yep,
he's got a new show out. Yeah, The Americans is the most underrated show ever.
Until it got
nicely
to the
rated.
season.
It's just amazing.
The Green season was not great.
Which was that?
It was like season 4 or 5.
4. I think they did 4 altogether.
Okay, so the first 3 then, absolutely loved, phenomenal. I would have done a different ending of The Americans, and it still just kind of like
it's still
drives
like
me crazy. But I love The Americans 2/3 of the way through.
Okay, yes. Matthew Rhys is in a new show right now that was good. It was a 1-season thing. The Beast in Me.
Okay. Great. He's
good.
a phenomenal actor, so I would definitely love to check that out.
And has in real life has a British accent, right?
Is he Welsh?
Yeah, so he does it with an American accent in this show.
Although I would say what I kind of planned on being really excited about for TV watching over the holidays was the college football playoffs, but now that Notre Dame has been so maligned, it's kind of ruined it for me.
I went to Duke, and I think that Duke winning the ACC, I don't know how all this stuff works, but somehow that ACC championship game ended up screwing Notre Dame out of it, who should be there. There's no way they're not better than James Madison and
There's
Tulane.
Something going on with Alabama. They're the only team that lost their playoff game and didn't drop. They lost to a 5-7 team. You know, their win over Auburn.
If you had said
didn't look
6-7,
great.
my daughter would have been thrilled.
Sorry, it doesn't work out so neatly in college football. But anyway, so now I guess I'll have a lot more time on my hands now that I won't be watching nearly as much football as I thought.
Yeah. Do you know the 6-7 thing that everybody does?
Yeah,
I don't understand
know.
it.
This is where it's like I'm a little too old, and then if I ask my sister, she'll just roll her eyes. So.
Yeah. Apparently, it's already out. It's not a thing
I think
anymore.
we're like past the 6-7 thing.
Yeah.
So whatever's next, I need to get ahead of it.
All right. Last question for Katherine. One piece of advice for the audience.
Writing advice or life advice?
You choose.
Okay. Well, I'll quickly give a piece of writing advice, and then I'll give, I don't know that anybody cares about hearing life advice from me. I haven't.
Now,
been
anyone who can
super long
write
time,
a
but-
terrific book and get a law degree at the same time, I want to hear some advice
so
from.
The best piece of writing advice I ever had was from my friend Joya Diliberto, who is also an author. She writes both nonfiction and fiction. And she said, when you're writing a book, you should first make sure you can describe what you're writing in a phrase or a sentence, and then in a short phrase, and then in one word. And you have to keep that word front and center throughout the entire time you're writing.
Oh, that's great.
My word for Daughters of Yalta was relationships. And once I kind of honed in on that word, everything really crystallized for me, that everything that I was doing, because it's so easy to get lost in so many sources and so many directions to go down with Churchill and Roosevelt and Stalin, that if you keep it focused on relationships, the relationships between the nations, between the leaders, and between the fathers and daughters, it just kind of helped to
That's great
contain
advice.
it.
Like to be mission oriented too. What's your word for the Hindenburg book?
Humanity. Herb Morrison, or the Humanity, and kind of humanity really kind of being put back in the center of these grand events.
Oh, that's great. That makes me want to read it more. That's great.
Great. Thank you.
Did you pick a title yet for the Hindenburg book?
Yes. Shadow Before the Flame, The Hindenburg Disaster and the Prelude to War. My mom comes up with all my titles. But I guess quick piece of general advice, I would say kind of be honest with yourself about what's important to you. I think it's easy to feel coming out of school and kind of in the first 10, 15 years out of kind of the things that you should be doing, the places you should be, the kinds of ways you should be spending your time. But I think kind of once you can be honest with yourself about what it is that you really want and who it is that you want to spend your time with and the kinds of things that you enjoy doing and that make you excited to think about and get out of bed each day, and then you go to bed and you wake up and you're still thinking about it, and just kind of being confident in the things that matter to you, which may be different from somebody else. I think that has been kind of the faster you can be honest with yourself, the happier you'll be. Not to say that there aren't times that you'll have to do things that you hate for pragmatic purposes or to get towards something that really matters to you. And you do have to stick it out and suck it up sometimes. But I think kind of then also on the flip side, not underselling kind of what you want today compared to what you want most. I think that those are kind of two things to keep in mind, and that have been very helpful for me as I've navigated this wacky career of being an author, being a lawyer, and also trying to, have some fun along the way with the people that I care about. I think that really kind of as much as to the extent that you can be honest with yourself, you'll be all the happier for it.
That's great. Those are two great pieces of advice. I'm going to be thinking about both of those for a while now. In fact, I have to retroactively go back to my other books and think about the word.
Hey, I mean, I don't know if anybody else does that, but
that's a great exercise.
It is the best piece of writing advice I've ever heard.
Yeah.
And one of the other just kind of like implicit kind of best lessons that I've had as a reader of kind of how to be a writer, especially writing tragedy. Norman Maclean's Young Men and Fire is just a masterwork in how to write about humanity amidst a tragedy. And I think a lot of World War II is about tragedy, but the reason we keep coming back to it is because it's about people rising above that and asking themselves to do more than they ever realized that they could. And so I think that those stories, they inspire us. It touched every aspect of humanity everywhere in the world. There is still so much to say. I don't know that I'll only ever write about World War II. I'm writing pre-World War II now. I can see myself doing something more Cold War oriented in the future, maybe even American Revolution. Who knows? But I think that that's why we love history, because it's stories of people triumphing in adverse situations and asking themselves for more than they ever realized they had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, this is terrific. Katherine, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having
in.
me. This has been great fun.